Hey guys, this is ADWCTA. Welcome to the Hades weapon aspects guide slash tier list. We have done a tier list for heat. We have done a tier list for keepsakes, and those are actually getting updated if you look at the agenda right here. Because now we're doing a tier list for weapons and weapon aspects, and the model behind all this is now 3 to 4 times more complicated than it was before. That's what always seems to happen. I just start building a model and I make it more and more precise. And you get to hear a little bit about how the modeling works for the weapon part. But anyway, the whole thing got more complicated, and so there's been some changes. I want to talk about them. So if you are not interested in that and you just care about the weapon aspect tier list, because that is what the title of this video is, and it's reasonable that's what you care about, then go skip over to the part where my picture becomes very small and Hades comes up in the background. That is when we will go over to the weapons part. But before that, I want to give a shout out to our Patreons. Thank you guys so much for supporting us through the years. Me, Merps, the Grinning Goat. I know usually the support is for Hearthstone content, but hopefully you guys are enjoying the Hades content too. And who knows, we might diversify into some other games as well in the future, depending on, if Blizzard ever does anything to Hearthstone Arena. BlizzCon's next week, we'll find out. Anyway, huge shout out. It's at patreon.com/grinninggoat. Top Patreons, thank you guys so much. You guys have held and really supported us for many months / years. Nor Doge, Karova, Doug A, Joe T, Yin Changyin 1, Dan F, Torjado, RV Night Train, Aaron LS, and Eric L. Thank you guys so much. And if you are not a Patreon, and you watch our YouTube videos a lot, consider supporting us through Patreon. Every little bit helps, or just like and subscribe. We don't say that a lot in our YouTube videos because it's I don't know. We should do that. We're Twitch streamers. It's just not in our heads to say it in the beginning of every video. Anyway, on to the actual content. The update on the tier list stuff first. First up, let's talk about the heat tier list. Every time we update stuff, I'm going to keep things updated. So the Reddit threads are always going to be updated. The links to the images in our videos. So if you go to the heat video now, it'll have the updated link. And it'll say February 8th, which is today's date. And that's what it'll point to. Obviously, I'm not going to delete and re-upload a whole video about all of this each time I update it. And I really don't plan on updating it again. But the heat tier list has received 2 updates already. This is the first update to the keepsake tier list. Anytime I have more information, better information, updated model, I'm going to update stuff for my own purposes, and I'll just upload them. So that's what this is. Because we're making a weapons video now, I'm just going to talk about this stuff, give a little bit of explanation. If I ever update it and I don't give an explanation, feel free to tweet at me or whatever, I'll answer. Okay. Or just find me on my stream. By the way, Hades streams are now Tuesdays, every Tuesday. I've just kind of added it as a permanent ongoing thing because I really don't know when I'm going to stop wanting to play Hades. And we've also been ending every single Hearthstone stream with a Hades run because I just want to play a Hades run every day. I don't know. So I don't know how long it's going to go on for, but until for the foreseeable future, there's going to be a lot of Hades runs on the stream, as kind of additional content. Okay, anyway. Yes, heat. These videos are unedited, so I'm going to do things like that sometimes. Okay, the biggest change is convenience fees moved. Convenience fee 2 has been moved from what was medium to actually punishing, and convenience fee 1 was moved from mild to medium. That seems like a huge change because it is, and it is because in the old one I messed up. I was looking at my math and the assumptions I used, and I started counting gold in my actual runs, and I realized I was missing 2 things. One, I was just wrong on how much gold that you get per chamber, usually. I don't know why I was doing it the way I did, but it was just wrong. And 2, I wasn't accounting for the fact that you can sell stuff and get gold, which you can. And in fact, there's a heat that actually makes you do it in Underworld Customs, and it is one of our easiest heats, so you're going to take it a lot. But the model doesn't account for Underworld Customs. It just pretends that, I think my assumption is every other well or whatever thing that you see, you sell something. which I think is high for most people, but that'll fold under World Customs in somewhere. Anyway, the point is I wasn't factoring in a lot of stuff like the fact that there are chambers that give you gold that you may be forced to go into or you may want to go into. Personally, I almost never go into gold chambers if I can help it, and for some reason, I was looking back at my math, and it was just, like, not there, and I was like, oh, well, you know, some people may want to take the gold chambers. I shouldn't just assume they don't, and oftentimes you don't have a choice, right? You just get gold. So that was, like, kind of a huge oversight on our part. But what it means is now, convenience fee is actually one of the hardest ones to take, because you can't take convenience fee 2 before convenience fee 1, and 2 is a lot lower than 1 because 40% of 100 is a lot larger than 40% of adding another 40% to a 140% base, right? Like, that's just how the math works. Okay, so in the punishing part, we have hard labor 1 and 2, routine inspection in the mirror 2 and 3, extreme measures 4, and the lasting consequences. So convenience fee 1 joins them, and it's not even like at the lowest end of this heat. It's like kind of in the middle of this heat range. So it's quite impactful. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate how good gold is in this game, because they don't understand how chambers work. I talked about this in my first heat video, but I'm going to talk about it again now really quick. Which is just that gold is free, or rather spending gold is free. The game doesn't give you random chambers. It kind of gives you chambers based on the correct percentage that it wants you to have between stuff like meta resources like darkness and gems versus stuff that actually helps you in the run. But if you ever go into a shop, it doesn't count that as you having gotten something, because you then have to pay gold to actually get the things. So everything you end up paying gold for in Chiron's shops is considered free. So if you buy, like, over the course of the game, 8 boons in Chiron's shop, let's say. Well, okay, that's a bad example. Let's say in Tartarus and Asphodel, you go to every single shop and you buy out all the boons. And you end up with, well, what's a reasonable number? 6. You are now entering Elysium with 6 extra boons. 6 extra Olympian boons that the game doesn't know about, or rather the game doesn't care about. So the game's still going to try to give you as many boons or gold or hearts or whatever, just, you know, run resources rather than meta resources, as if you didn't have those 6. Like, that's obviously hugely impactful in the game. So that's one of the reasons that the convenience fee is so good, and that was all calculated beforehand too. I just messed up on how much gold you're expected to have that you need to spend. Of course, that consideration also goes away after like starting with the last shop in Elysium, because after that they'll never give you any meta resources anyway. So it only affects the first few shops, but still, first few shops are very, very good. Anyway. Other things that moved: jury duty moved up 1, benefits package moved down 1, jury duty moved up 1, and this is the same reason, and it's because I had messed up my chambers. I thought I was overestimating mini bosses by a little bit, and I did more precise math, which opened up more regular chambers, which is why jury duty moved up. The place where jury duty is with now, like with damage control, is also a medium along with jury duty. Damage control was always a medium, and damage control moved up too, but just not enough. Whereas jury duty was always like on the edge between mild and medium, and just on the side of mild, and now it got moved up to be just on the side of medium. It wasn't a big move. It just, you know, it happens to be how we categorize things. But with benefits package, it's kind of the same thing. It's mostly how we categorize things. The mini boss thing moved a little. I realized that benefits package doesn't affect mini boss or boss rooms, not even the regular enemies in there, which I did not know before. That was my fault. So that moved down 1. So benefits package 1 is now medium. Benefits package 2 is now hot. But it really, like, they didn't move down that much. Another thing that we changed here is we adjusted the categories. So for some reason, medium used to be 0.4, like a band of 0.4 instead of a band of 0.5. I don't know. I think I did it to make the heats more even, but that was silly. So now we've evened out the cutoffs for each of them. And so that changed things a little. Anyway, that's the heat update. You can go look over this at your own time. But those are the only things that moved. It's not a big update. The bigger update is the keepsakes. Okay, for the keepsakes update, we did chamber by chamber in the analysis. So we broke down a lot of the estimates, and we actually broke Asphodel and Elysium out into their own categories instead of combining them in mid. I had to calculate it out separately. I just averaged them, and then I thought about it more, and I was like, they're actually quite significantly different. We'll just separate them out. I thought start, medium, start, mid, end was a nice system for like communicating, but as I thought about it more, I was like, actually, I don't know. Let's just give them each biome, right? Like, why mess with it? We're now taking better account into what the Olympian boons do. So one of the big things that changed is Olympians moved up. It used to be in the okay category and then dropping down to like frankly bad in mid. But now it's right below Purse, right above Palm in Tartarus, and pretty much the same in Asphodel. And in Elysium it falls back down. But it's still pickable in Elysium. It's just kind of in the middle with all the others. Like, you don't see it up there because it's part of the others category. So that was a pretty big change. And I think that matched up with a lot of what other people thought, and also kind of what I thought. I think I even remarked so on the keepsake that I was surprised that Olympians were so low. Also, averaging Olympians in Asphodel and Elysium kind of blurs the line and makes Olympians boons seem even worse than they are. Because Asphodel, they're actually quite good, as you can see. Whereas in Elysium, they're kind of meh. You can kind of do whatever, right? So many things are pickable. Purse is still number one. That hasn't changed. You can see more precisely where Palm moves around. The other thing that changed is in Styx, in the very end, there's actually been quite a big change because of how we're evaluating the chambers. Mini bosses into it too. I won't get into it. But basically the top is memories and earrings now. They're definitively the top, which is interesting because I feel like no one ever takes these two things, but they are mathematically speaking the best. And they were always in the top tier even in the previous iteration. They just weren't definitively above everything else. And now they are. Also, Acorn moved up a lot. As we calculated things more precisely. So that was like a calculation round. Not really a rounding one. It's like a mix of an assumption and a rounding issue that made Acorn appear like it was actually slightly below Collar and Tooth, whereas Acorn is actually above Collar and Tooth. And so are Bracers for that matter. Bracers, I changed an assumption. Like, I flat out changed an assumption. I had a really dumb assumption in there, I realized, which is that I had thought that it was as likely for you to get hit in the front as in the back. That's not true. Just from playing the game. You are much more likely to get hit from the front than the back. So, I mean, a lot of attacks actually don't hit front or back. The bracers have no impact on them. But the ones that do have impact, you are more likely to get hit from the front than the back. So I changed that assumption. That's why bracers went. So that was also my bad. What else? Oh yeah. That's kind of it. Plume went down a tiny bit. One of the interesting things is if you add everything up, a 100% plume is pretty much the same as picking the best out of Tartarus, Asphodel, Elysium, and then Styx. They're about equal. So if you can get plume to trigger every single encounter, then you might as well just go plume instead of worrying about all that other stuff. But assuming you can't, and I think it's a pretty good assumption, plume is a little below what your most efficient way of doing things are. On the other hand, for butterfly, you only need 50% of your rooms. So, pretty good, I think. Like, it's not that hard to get a 50% of your rooms triggered on the butterfly. Although, I guess, right, if you are getting 50% of your rooms triggered by the butterfly, do you really need keepsakes at all? Does it really matter, right? It's just like, Duster seems actually pretty good, but no one uses Duster because if you're really struggling and you really need Duster, well, you probably need to do more stuff than Duster, right? Like, Duster isn't going to win you the round. Yeah, you're going to need more help. So yeah. I think after looking at all this, the fact that Acorn is even more ridiculous because we always thought Acorn was the best by far. once you start stacking hard labor. But to see that it's already almost the best with no stacks of hard labor. Remember, this assumes 0 heat taken. It means now when you take, like, I did the calculation again with hard labor 5 because I have everything in the system, so I can do stuff like that. Acorn is insane. Like, Acorn is better than everything else put together. Like, if you take what you take in Tartarus, Asphodel, and Elysium put together is not half as impactful as 1 Acorn in 4. It's not even a quarter as impactful as 1 Acorn in 4 if you have hard labor 5 going on, and nothing else comes even close in sticks. It's just it's broken. There's no choice. You always take Acorn and sticks if you have hard labor 5 on, and I think that diversity is a little off. So I don't know. If I were the developers and I cared about end game content, I'd find a way to do something to Acorn. I don't even know what. But it definitely, like right now, after doing the math more, instead of like, oh, Acorn's definitely the best and I should take it, it's absolutely silly to take anything but Acorn. And if you even like, if you have hard labor on, even in Elysium, you have to take Acorn. And if you look at Asphodel, you probably don't have to take Acorn in Asphodel against Lerny, but it's still not a bad pick. Like, that's how great Acorn is in hard labor. Okay. Anyway, that's our update to the heat tier list and the keepsake tier list. Again, if you want to look at all this stuff, links are in the appropriate videos and Reddit threads. Okay. Now we are going to move on to the meat of this. We're what, 15 minutes in? We're going to move on to meat of this, which is weapons. We are going to talk about weapons, and let me get to the Hades game. Nope, that's not it. There we go. Aha. Okay. So, Scully's over there. Let me kill Scully first. One of the things I want to talk about first is actually how this modeling worked with regard to the weapon aspects. It was kind of a hard journey to get here because I don't know about you, but whenever I want to research a game or I want to play a game, I want to find information, the Gamepedia or whatever wiki for the game is usually a great source of information. Unfortunately for Hades, the wiki's info is fairly incomplete by standards of most games, and it is sometimes misleading in that it presents things, and the game is misleading in that manner too. It's not really the wiki's fault. It presents things as being the same or similar, and they're not. Like, one example is, like, I don't know if you guys know this, but not all knockback is the same. Like here, I'm showing you a sword, right? This is the distance of a knockback from the special of the sword. See that? Doesn't matter where I hit him from, doesn't matter what direction, he moves that little bit. Now, this is a shield. Doesn't matter where I hit him from, doesn't matter what part of the shield I hit, he moves like double the distance. I don't know. They're both called knockback, right? And I think Poseidon's moves even farther or something. I don't know. I didn't look at Poseidon's, but I know whenever I get Poseidon's boon and I like tap someone, they go flying into a wall. So that's just one example. There's a lot more where that came from. And then also, sometimes the information is just wrong. Like, those are the worst. Because I had done a whole model and I just had wrong numbers. And I was like, wow, this doesn't make any sense. And so I tested some of them. Like, usually the ranges, because the information that actually comes from the game, like, if you can go here and, like, find stuff, they're right. But the ranges, they don't really tell you. And the wiki has some ranges in some locations, not in all the locations. But then, like, 20% of the ranges that the wiki has are wrong. And so I made correct ranges by literally measuring stuff on my screen. Also, there's no like per second on any information for the wiki, so I had to gather all of that on my own. Like, there was a lot of time actually spent just like figuring out what's actually happening in the game with Skelly. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to kind of tell you guys what the pieces are to get this. So some of the things I took into consideration in this model, just so you guys know that this is a very, very comprehensive modeling. And I don't know, I haven't heard anything, but there's probably some doubters out there that are like, oh, you may be able to do Hearthstone, which is a card game because it's just numbers, right? And just math. But you're dealing with like a 3D game here with like timing and area of effects and all this other stuff. Like, how does your algorithm translate? Well, we take into account stuff like the shape of the AoE, the area it covers, where the area of coverage is relative to where enemies would be, the range, whether it pierces, if the AoE is moving each second that it goes, possible delays. Like, for example, I could calculate Eris or the main damage in Gilgamesh really well. Whether it could possibly like give opponents time to move out of the way. For example, in Rail, your special, right, takes like a second before it lands. So that has a delay, and also your opponents can move away. Whereas something like the main damage, doesn't matter where your opponent moves, it is delayed damage. But it doesn't matter where your opponent moves, right? Like all this is taken into account. But the most interesting thing that I had to take into account, which wasn't in the first version of this, and why it took a longer time to release, is this. I want to show you guys something. I don't know how many people actually know this. I mean, you'll know the basics of it, but I don't know how many people thought really hard about this. Okay, so here's a sword. This is the 3-hit sword combo. We're all very familiar with it. Blah, 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 blah. The 3rd hit moves you forward, right? It's often a point of contention because you don't really want it to move forward. Oh, by the way, if you're listening to all this and you're like, I want the tier list. Where's the tier list? Come on, talk about the tier list. That'll happen quite soon. But this will help you understand why I'm getting my numbers, right? Like, I'm not going to show you all the equations in my sheet that supports this, but I could kind of describe it to you. Okay, anyway. So what you may not know is, I'm going to switch over to mouse and keyboard because you can really get a feel of this in mouse and keyboard. And this is what also, in doing these tests, it convinced me that mouse and keyboard is actually so much better than controller if you are good enough. I use controller. It feels so much better. The game tells you to use controller because it's just like easier. But you could do things on mouse and keyboard that you just can't in the controller. And it's not just about auto aim. I mean, it's auto aim related, but it's not just about auto aim. And it mostly involves going 2 directions at once. So I'm going to use mouse and keyboard. I'm going to hold the left button while I'm going to tap attack facing Skelly. See what's happening? I am moving backwards. The 3rd hit still moves forward, but the 1st hit moves backwards. The 2nd hit doesn't really move, but the 1st hit moves backwards. Similarly, I can be moving up. I can be moving down. That very 1st hit, even while it's in the animation, because the animation for the sword never breaks, allows you to move in whatever direction you pick. So you can use that to dodge enemies, position better, chase enemies, whatever. But the 3rd attack always hits wherever you're attacking. So those are actually treated differently in the model. And they're both different from something that can't move. Like, for example, a spear does not move much, right? You get a little bit of movement at the end of your combo, and I have factored that in, but it doesn't move much. And some doesn't move at all, like Rama, for example. Oh, crap. Yeah. I am holding a direction. You can sort of tell. But I barely move. This is probably the least movement ability in the entire game. And it's also why I thought Rama special was going to be off the charts on my model. And it wasn't. It's good, but it's not off the charts. And it's because its DPS is only so good. Its number of triggers per second, it's only so good because it locks you completely. And you would have to stop it to move. Anyway, so that's taken into account of animation cancels, of course, are taken into account. Like, you can't model the fist, for example, or even the sword without animation cancels. It's just so important. And they're treated differently than actual things that just allow you to move. Like, for example, the rail special, which you could just move around in. What else is taken into account? The 3-hit combos, they were interesting to model because you have to figure out, like, how often you get those hits in, right? Like, the 3rd hit is deals the most damage for a reason, because it's the third hit. You may be dealing an enemy that's already dead, they may have moved away, you may not have a target. Prerequisites, like stacking debuffs. So a lot of these ones, for example, Hades, aspect of Hades, you hit someone and they get a debuff, and then you can hit them more for more damage. That's good and all, but the fact that you had to hit them once with something and then just hit it with something else puts in a lot of factors in. Like, how likely are you, how good it is to use the first ability in the first place, how much that locks your flexibility in, and if you've already hit them, right? So they're already damaged, so you're not killing the same amount of enemy like that, right? Like, if you try to do it on a skull or a rat, you're not going to get bonus damage on the skull and the rat, because they're already dead. So all this is actually calculated into the model. It's quite a sophisticated model is kind of what I'm getting at. Obviously, the damage, base, crit, number of hits. Number of hits is very interesting, because people usually think of number of hits as in, like, how many times can I make Zeus trigger, right? Like, I'm going to take a fist, and then Zeus will trigger all these times. Ha ha ha, so good. By the way, the fist, super flexible movement, right? Like, look at this movement. And again, with mouse and keyboard, you have to move where you're hitting, right? Like, I can't move backwards and attack, but with mouse and keyboard, I can do this. I can do this all day. Can't do it. Can't do it with... you could sort of do it in that you could punch, and then in the recovery move back. Punch, and in the recovery move back, right? It's not the same. Okay. But yeah, so the number of hits actually has... the main use is actually just to stagger your enemy, because as you're hitting them, they can't hit you back. So all that is calculated in. The percent chance that you have to actually use a stacking ability that you're going to choose, like choice in our Hearthstone model, is very fundamental. So it's pretty easy to port choice back here in terms of choice of boons and all that. What else? Oh, the stagger, though, doesn't work on bosses, so that has to be factored in. And then there's this really interesting thing that I had to build in that uses a lot of these pieces called vulnerability as a concept, which means basically how vulnerable you are using this move. Like, range is important, the amount that you can move during the move or between the move, how long the move locks you in place for, right? Like, all this stuff. So all this is built in. It's a pretty freaking big thing, is my point. All right. Now, before I get into the tier list, I have one more thing to talk about. Stay with me. And that is, and I'm talking about this because I get a lot of comments about it, and it is high heat skews. I talked about it in the keepsake tier list. It's actually part of the keepsake tier list now, like some of the higher amount of skews that using high heats get. Because if you're listening to like a 2-3 hour video on this stuff, you're probably trying to do some heats. Like, you're not just like playing through the game for the first time, like you haven't gotten to redacted yet, and you're just watching a tier list video of like weapon aspects that you don't even have access to, right? Like, you're not doing that. You're probably doing your bounties, or you're trying to push heats. And so you're not playing the base game. This tier list has to be done on something, so I did it on the base game. It's also really pointless to do it on 64 heat, and I can't do it on 32 heat because I don't know what heats you're taking. Again, I could put all the information in my model, but I have no way to present the information to you. So I'm going to describe what happens in high heats here. And this should be obvious, or if not obvious, you should know this if you think about it a bit. And other people have definitely created guides that mention this stuff. So one of the biggest skews in the game that I found is EM4. People may say other things, but I think EM4 is the biggest skew of what weapons work and what weapons don't. And that is because it limits and screws over ranged weapons so much. I could do so well using melee weapons and like whatever with EM4, but if I'm trying to use a bow or a rail or whatever, EM4 is a mess. And that's because in EM4 there are way more vases, and the vases mess up your auto aim, so you cannot hit Hades at range. On top of that, it's dark, so you cannot auto aim at range. So it's just basically, also on top of that, Hades throws spears, which is, you know, to do anti-range stuff. So almost all of the things added in EM4 are specifically anti-range. So one of my suggestions generally is, if you're doing a range weapon, just don't put on EM4. Like, why? Why put yourself through that? I mean, generally don't put on EM4 anyway. It's one of the harder heats. We put it as punishing. but it's not anywhere near as bad when you're not using range. If you are using range, though, stay away. Okay, so that's one. The second one, forced overtime, again, messes up range. If they get to you faster and you need range and it's part of your thing, right? Pretty obvious. Also, it messes up stuff that's very slow. Like, we're talking Arthur, Guanyu. Like, if it takes you this long to swing and they're hitting faster, they're going to be more likely to hit you and more likely to escape your possible stun lock, which, I mean, Arthur never stun locks anyway, but the slowest enemies. But you're just, it's just bad. Okay. Another obvious one, healing. If you have lasting consequences 4 on and you can't heal, well, alternate ways of healing, like the Guanyu, a lot better. Sword hammer, fist hammer, all this stuff, a lot better. If you really like to put the timer on, well, then weapons with lower DPS are a lot less viable. Like, you want your heavy hitters, which are usually your hidden weapons. If you have large weapons like Arthur's sword or Guanyu's spear, you don't want to put bubbles on. You don't want to put damage control on. These are just obvious things, but I feel like I mentioned them because I'll say something like, Arthur's sword is good, and then someone will be like, oh, but have you tried it with forced overtime 2? It's a lot worse when you put forced overtime 2 on and bubbles and damage control 2. You do that, and then you won't be having such an easy time anymore, ADWCTA. And I'm like, okay, what point have you made? Like, nothing, because no one's forcing you to put those on. You can put those on as some of your final heats. You can get to 32 easily without them. Like, so what? Right? Okay. What else? Jury duty. The crowds are worse for single hitters, which is like Zag Rail, Hestia Rail, and Chiron Bow. Those are not as good with jury duty. Just thought I'd run over all the ones I could think of as a disclaimer. Okay, we're going to get to the actual list now. First off, the first thing, you know what? I'm going to do a flash so people know. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to point at this. I'm going to wait a second so people who are scrolling through the video know that something has happened, because now I'm actually going to get to the tier list. We are 30 minutes into the video, and I am actually getting to the tier list that is the title of the video. Because that's how we do things. Okay. First things first, on the tier list is not all weapons are created equal. This game is generally very well balanced. I talk about it a lot in keepsakes. Keepsakes are super well balanced, so that when things are like a little bit off, like Shaw, for example, is just like a little bit worse than everything else, and everything else is so like here, and then Shaw's like here, and you're like, I guess Shaw's not like super underpowered, but like, why is it underpowered at all? Everything else is like, they're so precise with things. Heats are not as balanced. Weapon aspects are super unbalanced, and weapons themselves are even more unbalanced. There are just flat out significantly better weapons and significantly worse weapons. And I'm sure you know it if you play the game, but in case you were wondering, it is true. They are just like mathematically like off. So we'll start, and interestingly, I don't know if they did this on purpose, but the base weapons, there are 3 tiers of base weapons. Like, 2 of them are about the same score, and then there's a gap. And then 2 of them are about the same score, and then there's a huge gap. And then 2 of them suck. Like, the base weapons just totally suck. And I'm sure you know which 2 they are. Actually, you might not. Some people really like one of those. So let's start with the best weapons. The top 2, the best base weapons, I'm going to asterisk it, right? Because if you have a base weapon that's really crappy, but then all of your aspects are like super good, you're going to end up with a pretty good weapon. And on the other hand, if you have a weapon aspect with the base is like really good, but then your weapon aspects don't add a lot to it, then it's not going to be the best. And there's examples of both of these. So again, interesting. Like, maybe by design. I don't know. I don't know if Supergiant Games is doing all this on purpose, or if they just like, you know, they wanted everything to be balanced, or like they wanted a large percentage of things to be balanced and they've like kind of failed, and they either haven't fixed it yet or they're just not planning to fix it because whatever, it's a single player game. The Supergiant Games, if anybody working there is watching this video, I don't think it's too late to do a balance patch at all. These are weapon aspects, super endgame content, right? Like for us endgame folks. And having a little balance towards the very endgame, more variety, I think it'll be very much appreciated and extend the life of the game. Especially if you're not planning to do a DLC, which please do a DLC. And if you are doing a DLC, obviously you're going to patch it. So hopefully people are. So hopefully we get a little traction on this, but they have not released a real balance patch in like over 2 months. So I don't know. Maybe one's coming. All right. So the best two weapons, base weapons, are spear and shield. They're almost identical in score. And I want to emphasize how hard it is to be almost identical in score. Like, these things are worth about, I'm going to say the number wrong and then mess up, but let me quickly look at this. They are worth approximately 11 boons. Boons being what a rare Olympian, that's our unit of measurement, what a rare Olympian boon would be worth in the first chamber. They are worth about 11. Just the base weapon, no, not even the Zagreus aspect. But that's about where the similarities end. Because the shield, I'm going to start with that. Because the shield has the best weapon aspect in the entire game. And that is my favorite weapon aspect and the one that I do the best on. And I don't think it's a coincidence. And before you ask, no, I did not mess with numbers until I got my favorite weapon to be the best. We don't do things like that. I just let the math guide me. If things look really wrong, I try to fix it. And actually, I tried really hard to make this thing go down, and it just like wouldn't. I looked at it, poked at it in various different ways, and I'm like, what if I tried to think about it this way? What if I think about it that way? And it never goes down significantly. Like, it is always the best weapon aspect in the game. It's aspect of Zeus, not aspect of Chaos. Sorry for the fake out. I didn't mean to do that. I was hovering over the Zeus. I realized I didn't actually hit it. Aspect of Zeus comes in at a little over 5B. That means the amount of value that you get from picking this over not having anything. And I don't think you can play with no weapon aspects. I think you have to do aspect of Zagreus, and so you're going to get some kind of bonus anyway. But imagine before you had weapon aspect, before you had any Titan blood to spend, that shield, compared to aspect of Zeus, is missing about 5 B's worth of value. And that is not the highest in terms of how much the weapon, how much the aspect of Zeus is adding to the shield, but it is overall the highest because the shield is also the best base weapon. Aspect of Zeus, mostly why it's good is that it gives you an attack while you can do another attack. So you know how most people can only do 1 attack at a time? Well, you can do 2 attacks at a time. Like, it's not the fastest moving thing, but you can control it. Oh, and by the way, all the projectile speeds are taken into account. Anything that increases your movement speed is taken into account. Remember, we did the whole thing on movement. Like, so all this is taken into account. We are not assuming that you are pairing this with Zeus. So the fact that this is a pretty damn good synergy with Zeus or Dionysus or whatever, actually, like, would probably make it even better than what we're giving it credit for. I mean, it is, right? If you pair with Zeus or Dionysus, you just kind of get a better weapon than our assumptions, which is you kind of you put a thumb on the scale, right, to what you want, but you kind of just go with the run. We're assuming no keepsakes, no heat, right? Like, what kills me about this weapon aspect and the way they designed it is this right here. Like, obviously it's going to be powerful. You could do this and block, right? Like, this is how I beat Hades on EM4. I do this, I hold this, Hades can't hit me, I hit it, then I charge, I'm still invincible. I do this again, I face Hades again. It's just, I beat Hades on EM4 taking like 6 hits. And almost none of them from Hades. They were from, like, I don't know, random stuff that I like fell prey to. You know, maybe a pot or something. Actually, probably not a pot. I don't know. But Hades almost didn't touch me. And it's silly. It's just kind of a silly thing. And the worst part is this. It deals 30 damage per hit. The base shield attack deals 25 per hit. I don't know why they gave this one an extra 2 damage. I mean, an extra 5 damage. They could have easily not given it the extra 5 damage, and it would still be one of the best, but not like head and shoulders above everyone else. So I don't know. Anyway, so this is the best. Then within shield, you have this pretty huge gap, like one of the largest gaps in any weapons. And the next one comes in is Aspect of Chaos, at somewhere around 2.5 boons, so like almost half the value. I don't know if it's pretty much half the value of Aspect of Zeus. So I know a lot of people like Aspect of Chaos. Maybe it was the best or really good or about as good as Zeus before the nerf, but I've tested it after the nerf. And here's the problem with the Aspect of Chaos. The problem is this. Okay, that was terrible. I did not show you the problem because I can't show you the problem. Those extra shields, I have to go into a game to show you it. The extra 5 shields that bounce out in addition to your main one, they do come back to you, right? That they do, but they don't bounce to additional targets. So not only are they going out in this like fan direction that doesn't have the best coverage, but they also stop once they hit a target. They're like arrows. Right? They don't bounce, they don't do whatever, they just kind of hit something, and if they don't hit something, they come back to you and they have another chance of hitting something. But if they hit something, it's done. So they are not, like, don't think of them as actually extra shields. Think of them as a weird version of the bow special, where you, like, send out a bunch of arrows, except these arrows also come back to you. And they deal a little bit more damage. It's just, it doesn't quite add up. The charging mechanic is fine. It's actually not that awkward, but the bonus you get from it is just not big enough to be premium. It's kind of like we rated in the okay category, right? It's middling. After this, you have the Aspect of Zagreus. This is the highest rated aspect for a Zagreus. Usually, Zagreus aspects are worse than non-Zagreus aspects. I think everybody can confirm that, and mathematically it's true. They are actually approximately half of, I would say, I want to say if you average out all the Zag aspects and you average out all the other aspects, Zag aspects give you half the value. But they're not always the worst. This one is actually the best of the Zagreus aspects. So, base damage is always good. Anything that is a multiplier only multiplies base damage. So base damage is good. Not much to say about it. And the worst is Beowulf. I have to put my picture somewhere, so I've decided to put it in the middle and cover the hidden aspects. Also, what the hidden aspects actually say are not terribly meaningful because they're very complicated. So Aspect of Beowulf is Dragon Rush bonus damage in area plus 100%. Your Dragon Rush is your rush. That means it hits a wider swath of stuff. That's not too important. And bonus damage plus 100% only affects the rush itself. And I think for Aspect of Beowulf, the rush itself deals like 40 damage. So you get 40 extra damage whenever you rush something. Like, it's fine, but it's really not anything to write home about. You also take 10% more damage from all sources. Like, what the hell? That's huge. That's like an epic version, an anti-epic version of Athena's boon. Epic. So you're losing like more than 1 boon's worth of stuff, like right off the bat, for a not so great ability. But what really sets it back, and I had to do this with every, with a lot of things, but definitely with every hidden aspect, is all the attack speeds and all the damage and everything are just different weapons. They're different for all of these. So for example, this hits at about 2/3 the speed of your regular shield slam. And again, you're just staggering people less. Like, you still have the knockback as the shield, but if you're hitting at 2/3 the speed, you're getting 2/3 times the knockback, you're doing 2/3 the stagger. It just kind of adds up, and you're just more vulnerable doing this. It does not hit any farther than the regular shield. It does not have a significantly wider arc. It's just worse. It deals more damage, but it's not a good trade-off. This, on the other hand, is actually better than the regular shield because it just deals more damage. And the startup is a little slower, but most of the time you're trying to hit multiple targets with this, and it doesn't actually move any significantly slower than the regular shield. So it still doesn't add up to anything good. Another thing that sucks about this is you block with the shield, right? Most people take the shield, you want to block sometimes. But because the attack is slower, your block also comes out slower. Like, it just all adds up to be like, all this little stuff just really makes Beowulf like bad. So the reason you would take Beowulf is because you have what's over here. The Dragon Rush is cast empowered, which means all of your casting boons change into something that just kind of adds damage in, like, usually in a little area once you hit your target. And so you charge in the middle of something, burst, right? You get a nice burst thing. And that's good and all. It's really where most of the value of this aspect comes from, but it doesn't make up for all of its downfalls. Like, there's just too many negatives to it. It's still overall positive, you know, but it doesn't even beat out, like, the Zagreus one. That's how bad it is. Like, you'd rather have 15 extra damage on base for your attack and dash strike. Okay, so that's shield. Let's move on to spear. Spear is pretty much as good as shield as a base weapon. But unlike shield, spear does not have Zeus. Remember, Zeus is over 5 Bs worth of value. The best that the spear has is around 4. And 2 of these aspects hit around 4. And that is aspect of Achilles and aspect of Hades. They're almost tied. I'm not going to differentiate them. In my model, technically Hades is better than Achilles, but definitely by like a number that's well within my margin of error, so I'm not putting any stock in it. Achilles is my favorite weapon for the spear. The post-rush bonus damage, you can bank. Like, it's 4 hits after you rush, so after you do your rush, you don't have to. You could, like, run around and, like, do whatever, right? This, of course, is useful because it means you can start every fight already powered up. The downside of it is that you have to do the rush a lot, which puts you in a weird place. Oftentimes you don't want to move, could put you in danger. But the positive side, and one of the most useful parts, is also the rush, where if you're ever trapped in a corner in an undesirable location, you can just use it to get out into a better place. And you can also cancel it, and then it becomes your normal spear attack. This is one of the examples of the wiki being like having like either a miscommunication or something. So the wiki says there is a hidden penalty where the range for this with the Achilles weapon is smaller than the regular special. It is not. The rush aspect of it is shorter range than the spear. So if I throw my spear, I'm going to hit the same place. You can't see where I'm pointing. I'm going to hit the same place as a regular spear. Like with Hades or whatever. Hades aspect or whatever. But if I rush, I only come to the place where this spear is. And this spear is not at its farthest reach. So they're kind of right, but they're not really right. Because they say your range is lower. But your range isn't lower. Just your rush range is lower. But yeah, this is just kind of overall great. Unfortunately, my problem with this, and it may be me playing, because I think this is generally a pretty good high heat weapon for most people, is that with Hades, you kind of don't want to rush into him. So you kind of have to keep like playing this weird zone game with the spear where you have to be like a certain distance away. So if he ever tries to get you, you can like freaking like dash away really quickly. And the spear doesn't let you do that. Like, it doesn't quite get you from one side to the other side if he just moves in any way in the wrong way. So I don't know. Aspect of Hades is the other one that's top tier for spear, and overall one of the best weapons. These are all, if you're looking at it from an overall perspective, they're not as good as Zeus, but they're in tier 2. They're definitive tier 2. And tier 2 has only 3 weapons. Tier 1 has only 1 weapon, Zeus. Tier 2 has 3 weapons. It's the Achilles spear, the Hades spear, and then a weapon we'll get to later. So this is Hades. Punishing bonus damage is 150%. This is you charge it up, you hit it. You don't have to hit him with the largest charge, but then they have this thing on them for quite a while, and then every other damage you deal with your like attack and oh no, it's just all sorts of damage. That's why it's rated so high. So this includes everything then, whether it's your attack, your special, your dashes, your aid, Dionysus, like Eris, all damage. What's good about it is that, like, what's bad about it is you first have to hit them with this stuff. This is not the easiest thing to land on people. What you have to generally do is like be around a corner where they can't hit you, or be behind a rock, because this thing goes through all the rocks. The pro way to do it is to dash out of it, which gives it a little bit more range, and is a little more useful, but it is a pretty vulnerable move. Like, this is not the best move of the spear. But on bosses, right? Super useful. Plus 150% damage from all sources. Melts bosses. And bosses are one of the most impactful parts of the run. So if you're wondering how, if we just like modeled something, you have to model the game based on what the game throws at you, right? So the enemies are as important as what your bonuses are. So every single boss is modeled out in the model in terms of how much damage they do, what their general like reach is, how much they're expected to increase the difficulty of the run relative to if they didn't exist. Every single chamber actually is mapped out like that. And you need all that in order to get a lot of this information. It's just a very complicated model at this point. That stuff is useful much more for keepsakes than for weapons, but it's still used here. Anyway, not finally, the next one is Guanyu. Guanyu is about as good as the Zagreus shield, which is to say it's bad. It's not terrible, but it's not particularly good. You could just see why it's not good. This is its attack. Like, do you see how slow it is? Arthur is about as slow and deals almost double the damage. Also, Arthur hits in a giant wide thing. This one has the same range and same whatever as your regular spear. It's just, yeah. What's better about it is your spear throw. This spear throw is 45 damage. It is much slower than the regular spear throw, but you can see how far you can move after a spear throw. This is the redeeming part of this. You actually are very safe doing the spear throw because you have a lot of movement. Like, I'm just tapping this. I don't know if you can hear it. Like, there's that delay, but it's not a dead delay. You're not just standing there doing nothing. You can actually cancel this, by the way, into a quick attack, right? That was very quick. That comes out. I don't know why you're going to throw something and then also attack, but you can do it. And otherwise, this preserves your flexibility in a way that this does not preserve your flexibility as well. It's actually not that bad for flexibility preserving. This is one of those things where I think people who hate the Guanyu, or the attack of the Guanyu, or they normally use the Guanyu, but they generally stick with the special, which is what it's known for, and I'll get into it later. Not the special, the alternate, is, check this out. The movement is quite good. It's a little, like, all of these, you can move in any direction. This is not like the sword. You are not obligated to move forward. So you should be sidestepping everything when doing this. It is quite Guanyu-y and martial artsy, right? Almost fist-like. Not quite. You can't just, like, kind of like smoothly move around stuff. You have to do it in little bursts. But you can do it. Of course, you can also dash, but you can dash with every weapon in the middle. So yeah, so I think the Guanyu has some potential. I was surprised that the Guanyu didn't come in negative, honestly, because if you've played with the Guanyu at all, you know that it subtracts out 50% of all your health and healing. So if you normally have like 300 health by the end of the game, you now only have 150, and that's terrible. Like, super, super terrible. And its attack is worse than your regular spear attack, and its special is the special worse? Let me see. I don't know if the special is worse or barely better. Guanyu, it's worse. It's a tiny bit worse. The special is a tiny bit worse than the regular spear special. But the attack is a lot worse than the regular spear attack. It just doesn't deal enough damage for how slowly it hits. Of course, if you actually go on very high heats, the charging thing is really, really good because it heals you. And not a lot of things heal you. I mean, with lasting consequences, almost nothing heals you. So it becomes kind of a break the game mechanic kind of weapon. But overall, it's not good. It's bad. I was surprised it came in positive. There were iterations of this model before the final one where it came in negative. It is a very high swing kind of weapon. So that's why it's used to break the game in the end. Finally, the worst aspect of Spear is also the worst aspect in the entire game, as in the aspect adds the least to the base Spear. Remember, we're still on the best weapons, right? The best base weapons are Spear and Shield, so aspect of Zagreus on Spear is hardly the worst weapon. There are so many worse weapons in this. But the Zagreus part is not adding a lot. The Spear is just kind of a good weapon. Like, this reach, I don't think people know how long this reach is. This is how long the reach is. Where is this guy? This guy's almost on the edge of the screen. Like, no, this is not as long as the bow. No, it's not even as long as the rail. But it's like twice as long as the sword. And I don't think people realize that. Like, the spear isn't like a little bit longer than the sword. Like, I'll just give a comparison, right? Look at where we're standing. We're standing here, right? Around where that like little indent comes in. Okay, a little bit forward from that. I'm going to switch over to the shield, to the sword. This is how far the sword hits from the same position. Isn't that comical? I'm hitting Skelly with the spear, but with the sword, ugh. Anyway, the Zagreus aspect literally just gives you special damage, range, and speed. The damage is not base damage, so it's the same as getting like +% damage, which doesn't do as much. And the speed doesn't exist. The 25% speed makes up for the 25% range. So your attack speed is the same. Your DPS is the same. It just goes farther. It's very misleading the way they put it. So it just has 25% more range. And then it deals, what's plus 25 damage? Oh, I don't see the base damage here. I think the base damage is 25. So whatever a quarter of 25 is, like 6.25 damage. You're dealing 6.25 extra damage. Yeah, 31, right? Instead of 25. And then, like, one of the reasons why the spear isn't even better, because the spear, we talked about, I realize now we talked about why the shield was so good. It's also kind of self-explanatory. You can block. You can block everything in the freaking game almost. Like, the shield special is terrible, but the shield attack is good. Also, something underrated about the shield. Sorry, jumping around. Watch the damage numbers off of Skelly. Boom! I got an extra 60 damage. Boom! I got another extra 60 damage. Why? Because I have knockback. The normal base damage, and this is Zagreus, is 40, right? With like something like the spear, the normal base damage is like 25. So with the shield, if I get a hit in, if I hit something into the wall, I'm not just not getting 25 damage, which is the base shield damage of the attack. I'm getting 100 damage. That's base. No boons, no nothing. 100 damage instead of 25 for each hit. Like, that's one of the reasons why the shield is really good too. I know a lot of people don't like the shield attack, but it's actually one of my favorite attacks. Its range is deceptively long too. Like, you look at this. This range is better than the sword. There we go. Like, it's play with the shield's attack. You'll see its value, and of course you get to do the travel thing, and you get to block bosses. Okay, the spear, on the other hand, is good because of the range. Right? We talked about the range. That's really why it's good, which makes it special kind of crappy, even though it's not crappy at all. The spear special, I think, is the. I'm gonna check. I think it's the best special. Okay, it's not the best special. It's not even close to the best special. It's the third best special. But it's still very good. There's basically two tiers of specials. Like a bad tier that's really bad, and then if you double the value of the bad tier, you get to like the good tier. So it actually is a decent special. But the problem with it is that it kind of serves the same purpose as your spear. Your spear already hits long distance, so your special just serves a little longer distance, right? Like, it's not quite the same as, let's say, a bow, get a normal bow, where you are hitting them in a straight line and you pierce, or you do this. Clearly, these things have different values, right? They have different situational applicabilities. With the spear, like, your situational applicability is this thing, right? It's not that. This is like, for some reason, I can't reach something. It's almost like an extension of your attack. There is an interesting way to cancel it, but you don't get that much out of it. And you can't cancel your main attack. I mean, you can, but you literally get like less than 0.1 second. Probably like 0.02 or something second, by my estimate. Okay. Anyway, that's why the Zagreus spear, it just adds the least. Because the special is kind of, it's either an afterthought or your main attack is an afterthought, right? One or the other. So by making the special better so that it approaches the value of your main attack, you're not really getting two options. You're basically getting like 1 1/4 option, right? Like an option and an option to extend the attack even more. So there you go. Worst value in the game in terms of what it adds is Aspect of Zagreus Spear. All right. Now we're done with the good weapons. Those are the top 2 weapons, and we covered the top 3 weapon aspects of the game. Zeus, Hades, Achilles. We are now going to move on to the mid-tier weapons. These weapons are what I would consider balanced. I think this is what Supergiant Games was going for when they created the weapons, like this kind of range. And we'll go to them. They are bow and fist. So let's do bow first. Bow is a decent weapon. In case you didn't know, if you get it at the exact right time, the little thing comes out of you. I suck at this. There we go. The little thing comes out, and what that does is it increases the damage you deal by a bit, and it's base damage. So you want to get good at doing that. But overall, this is kind of what the bow does. If you use your mouse and keyboard, you can do more fancy things, but not by much. The bow is not particularly mobile. And the bow special is one of the bottom tier specials. It really doesn't make sense to differentiate between the bottom tier specials. The shield special is also a bottom tier special. They just don't do much. You try your best not to use this. Like, it freezes you for so long. Like, look how long until I can move. Look how little I'm moving. You're just gonna get hit so much doing this. So that's the only 2 you have. The good part about the spear and shield also is you have so many different options. So you can like have things for different situations. With the rest of these weapons, you really don't. And the bow special being so bad is kind of a slap in the face on top of that, right? If you're the shield and your special is not good, that's fine. You also have your blocking, you also have your charging, you have stuff you can do. If you're the bow and this sucks, what are you gonna do? Nothing. You're just gonna do this all the time. I think that's one of the reasons why people don't like the bow. It's kind of monotonous. Okay. The other thing to know about the bow is that there is no dominant weapon aspect. The weapon aspects of the bow top out at the lowest amount. So the best weapon aspect in the bow is Rama, I think, to no one's surprise. But you're only getting like 3.5 B's worth of value from it. Like, you don't even hit 4. You don't even hit 4, which Hades and Achilles hits, and that's not even particularly high, right? Like, Zeus is 5.5, I think, or something around there. So With Rama, you have a totally different weapon. I hate doing this first, but your special changes into something useful, which is a huge break for the bow. Like, remember how we said having a bad special when you have nothing else to do is terrible? Well, Rama solves that. It gives you a good special. This is good DPS. Okay, it's not good DPS. It's good DPS if you put something on it, right? Like if you put Zeus, maybe not Zeus. If you put Dio on it, it's pretty good. You could put Demeter on it, and that'll like really cold people down. You want to put some kind of effect on it. Doing this when something's against the wall with Poseidon is a crap ton of damage. Of course, it's hard because they don't have a lot of force attached to them, so it doesn't. Even though it is Poseidon's knockback, it doesn't actually knock them back as far as you would like, because the base damage on these is 5. Okay, so once you get that shared suffering on them, you can get this on as many minions as you like, and then you hit them with the attack, and then everybody gets 72 extra damage, or whatever 60% of the damage you deal with. Something about the Rama Bow and that's usually the pattern, right? You do this, do a bunch of stuff, you attack, you hit it, and then everything like pops a little, and then you do this again, and then you just keep doing it. Rama charges slowly, but you notice how wide it is compared to the regular bow. So you do get a little more AoE on it. And interestingly, which I didn't know until I started like doing research into this, it hits farther than the regular bow. You see where this arrow is? I'm standing here on the corner of this little square here, and I'm hitting over there, basically where that line ends. You go to a regular bow, I'm going to stand in the same spot, I'm going to hit it in the same place. It doesn't reach there. I mean, the animation kind of does, but trust me, I tested this, the Rama Bow has more range. Which is interesting. Not terribly applicable, because the Rama Bow like takes forever to charge up, and you're rarely going to use it at that range, but just something interesting. Anyway, overall, Rama, a lot of damage coming up, and the fact that it has a useful alternate. In fact, it's a whole setup, right? You got to use both. Just makes it so much better. It's also a great high heat performing bow, because it deals a crap ton of damage. And when you put on a lot of high heats, I know speedrunners love it. I think the highest heat ever completed and recorded was with Rama Bow. It's just as good for high heat. You're a bow, you can stand farther apart from stuff, and you have very high DPS with the Rama Bow. And shared suffering is great with like all the jury duty stuff that you have to put on with high heats. So yeah, well, good stuff. Next up is, not far behind, is Chiron. All the bow aspects are relatively in the same area. They're not. It's not like you have Zeus all the way up there and then Chaos, Zagreus, Beowulf, right? It's not like Hades and Achilles are here and then Guanyu is kind of here and then Zagreus is all the way up. All the bow ones are very tight. So it surprised me that Rama wasn't better, honestly. Like, mathematically speaking, Rama is nothing to write home about. It's good. We rated in the good tier overall. But nothing like we rated in the good tier because the bow is an okay weapon. Rated by itself, as in what the aspect does, is actually only okay, and all of these are even worse than okay. So this is what I was talking about earlier, if you remember, with a weapon being like kind of on the low end of what its aspects does, and there's another weapon that's also on the. Anyway, next up is Chiron. I'm not a big fan of this weapon. I know a lot of people really like it, probably because it does that. And that means you don't have to aim. And I could see it being a huge help, especially if you use mouse and keyboard. But these arrows are still just your normal special arrows. But again, right, it fits this pattern of like, it turns a very useless special into a useful special. You still have to hit it. And when you get to later rounds, like, you would have to actually hit 3, probably even more of these in order to, you can hit 3 max, by the way. Like, if you don't move and don't do anything, you can hit 3 rounds of Chiron. But if you are moving and you are like not perfect with it, you're only going to get 2 rounds in before you have to re-trigger it. And the enemies in Elysium and Balan will make you re-trigger. So it's more annoying than it seems. Of course, very, very good against Hades, right? Which is what I think most people really like Chiron for. There's just nothing much to say about it. It's good. It's not like it's all single target, right? I mean, this pierces, but generally single target. These are just single target. In fact, if something gets in the way, it actually, like whether it's a wall or an enemy, it doesn't hit your target. But it's good for focus damage, and you generally want focus damage in a game like this. Next up is Aspect of Zagreus. Once again, right, we're like the shield. Aspect of Zagreus is not your worst aspect. And like the shield, the worst aspect is one that has to do with cast. I think the game just thinks casting is better than it actually is. Cast builds are definitely high rolly, but the problem with being high rolly is that it averages out to a pretty bad spot, and you have to high roll into your ridiculous build. So I think that's how they balanced it, but it means that when you're doing it mathematically, you're looking at the averages of things, and so they don't really perform very well. And also they do really poorly in high heat, because at some point, like in the highest heat, because at some point you have to start taking mirror stuff out, and then you lose your casting ability. Okay, so Zagreus Bow does something very, very basic. It adds 15% to attack critical chance. Adding percent chance to critical is like a fancy way of adding to base damage. The plus 15% critical attack chance might as well read plus 30% to base damage. Now, you have Artemis' stuff that works with crit chance, and so that is a better synergy than base attack. But besides that, it's calculated the same way. Oh, and it's less stable, of course. It high rolls and low rolls. So yeah, it's not good. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's good. Like I said, all the bows are like medium to low. So this is actually a bad weapon. We categorize it. I mean, okay, I'm gonna take that back. It's a okay weapon. It's a bad aspect. Like the aspect is not adding that much to it, right? Plus 30% base damage is not the best thing. It's fine. Hera is the useless one. Don't judge me for not maxing it yet. I don't have enough. I could have gotten enough Titan's Blood to actually max it. But I did play with Aspect of Hera at least twice, maybe 3 times. And each time I paired it with one of the casts where it doesn't stick in your opponent anyway, so that this Bloodstone thing doesn't matter. But overall, Bloodstone drop time, like if you're using Hera and you're using something that needs to be dropped, you're doing it wrong. The best things to pair with Hera aspect are like Dionysus, that just like booms a whole bunch of stuff, or other things that Eris' blades, for example, where you can hit into a crowd and then the blades pop out, rather than like casting the blade from really far away while the blades move really, really slowly. Like, that's what you're doing it for. So generally speaking, those are the ones you want, and they don't stick to people anyway. So the problem with it, of course, is that even if they don't stick to things, you have to go in and get it, or you're using the mirror one that lets you auto reload, but then you're only loading one cast at a time, which really limits the effectiveness of it. Like, I don't know, it doesn't look good, right? The Bloodstone drop time is not worth that much. It's mostly getting the value from the actual ability, and it's just not great. I don't know what more to say about it. Okay, that's the bow. The other one that is a normal weapon is the fists. The fists come in at a quite respectable amount of both flexibility and also DPS. It has a nice lock to it, right? Like, it hits 5 times in a combo, which, yes, the rail does get more than that, but the fists allow you to stun actually in an area. Like, this doesn't look like an AoE attack, but it is. Like, if you ever use the fist in a crowd, you can get more than one person, and that is sometimes, because you're so close into the enemies, potentially useful. More useful is the fact that you move when you do this. I cannot overstate how much this moving helps. And if you find yourself playing the fist and you're randomly moving when you're doing this, you're doing it wrong. Like, as you're attacking, figure out where you want to be to avoid damage while staying in range of the place you're dealing. Like, this is how you live with the fist, is this little slide thing. And of course, the fists have one of the best cancellations in the entire game, right? Almost no delay in this combo. That's where a lot of the value comes in. And that's because after the fist ends, there's a very long delay. Like, look how long of a delay you have before you can do anything. And during that delay, you can cancel it into anything. That being said, this is not the best attack. The best attack is your special. Your special comes in as... It's going to be the same for the sword, by the way, but I think that's more obvious. This special is a lot better than your regular attack. It doesn't quite matter, because you're going to be using both anyway. If you're ever playing this and you're like just kind of doing this around, like that's fine because you need to dash and avoid damage, but really try to work that in. And whenever you work your special in, don't like special. That's terrible. Special is terrible because look, you hit and then there's a huge period of time where you're vulnerable coming down. Like the fist, you can kind of move around whatever direction when you're doing it, but still, you can cancel it. Like, you can cancel so much of the delay with this. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Whereas immediate. So if you're ever using the special, just start holding the attack button when you come down, and you'll cancel a portion of the lag time. Okay. So that being said, the fist, the best aspect is obviously not Zagreus. It is the aspect of Talos. Comes in at a little over 4. It's good. It pulls the enemy to you, and then it gives a bonus attack kind of thing. So it's a nice built-in combo. It means you don't have to get into the fray as much. It's a lot better without forced overtime. You pull something to you, you hit it, you can get some backstab damage, you can pull again. This pull thing does not take any more time than the regular special. And it deals an extra 20 damage, and it triggers an extra hit for whatever, like, you know, you're applying, whether you have Zeus on it or Dionysus or like whatever, right? So it also adds a lot of damage onto this move. And it's already your best move. Remember, your special is your best move, not your attack. When you are the fist. Like, I think that's how most people play fist wrong. Is they're just not specially enough, or they're chaining specials, and you should never chain specials. That's when you get hit. So yeah, it's a pretty straightforward damage thing. Against bosses, you obviously can't move the bosses to you, so that's why it's not like one of the best. But I think Talos comes in as the 5th best weapon overall. So we have number 1 as Zeus, Hades and Achilles at number 2, and Talos at number 5. I think it's like, by the math, it's probably one of the more underrated ones, along with Hades. But Hades, I think people just don't like using the alternate. And Hades really forces you to use it. Also, I think the fact that, you know, the alternate is so, for Spear, is so, like, you're gonna get hit, that makes it really hard to stack a lot of heat onto it. So Hades is also one of those things that probably, and I don't have a lot of experience with that weapon aspect. I played it a couple times, and it was fine for me, but I didn't play it on super high heat. And I think when you get to high heat, like, I wouldn't want to be hit every time I want to, like, hit an enemy, you know, so that I'm not even using its ability except against bosses. And that's gonna hurt it, of course. Okay, so, right, sorry. Next one is Demeter. Demeter is almost as good as Talos, but not quite. This is very straightforward. It doesn't do anything until you hit 12 times with your attack. And even in the middle of that, you can use your special. Like, it just won't do anything special. It's just a regular normal special. But once it's charged, you can hit it, and he died. But it will hit it 12 times, I think. Some ridiculous number of times. Yeah, like 12 hits. Which doesn't really matter unless you have Zeus, because everything gets capped at a certain bit, and it's not like you're knocking things back or anything, but it deals a lot of damage. And it stays with you. You can bank it. So you can, like, kill an enemy, like, whatever, and then go to another enemy and immediately kill them, which is very useful. Because some enemies are very dangerous when you get close to them, and it's got pretty good flexibility. After that, there's a little bit of a gap, and then you get to Gilgamesh. Again, another hidden weapon that's not particularly great. So far, we haven't really found a good hidden weapon yet, outside of Rama. This is, you have Claws of Indiku and dash upper can maim folks. Maim damage is 400. You also have 2 dashes. I'm sorry, 2 extra dashes. So the dashes are good. You can also dash when you hold dash. I don't know why they added that, but you can't do that normally. You have to like tap it, but here you could just hold it. But anyway, the attack is totally different. You're now closer to a normal 3-hit combo. You end up with 5 hits over the course of a normal 6-hit combo. So not quite. You're a little bit slower than your average like sword or spear or whatever. But as you can see, it's a pretty wide hit. It's a little bit longer than the... Is it longer? Let me check. It's all measured out here. Fist, Gilga... It is not longer. It is actually the same distance as your fist, but it does cover a much wider area. Your special basically doesn't change, but if you dash special, you maim them, and that lets you deal plus 25% damage to them, which is not that much, because that plus 25% damage, it stacks with your other ones, like additively. So if you already have plus like 100% damage from other sources, you're just adding another plus 25%, so it's 125%. Like it's not that much. On the other hand, your opponent will deal plus 50% damage to you, and that's bad because your opponent generally does not have any sources of extra damage, so they're actually dealing 1.5 times damage to you, whereas you are dealing something like, I don't even know, like 0.1, like 10% extra damage to them, maybe even less than that, depending on how your build is. It's not worth it. It's good if you're like speed running and you like need to kill something fast. But outside of that, like doing that to a boss is generally not a good idea, for example. Now, the compensation for it is that your main damage is going to hit in a number of seconds, and it will hit for 400 freaking damage, which is a lot. So that is why you would do it to a boss. That being said, overall, I still think it hurts you about as much as it helps you. In the model, this whole entire main whatever thing combined with everything works out to be barely a positive thing. And if you were to guarantee the main damage hits, for example, because you're facing a boss, then it becomes somewhat positive. But it's definitely below 1B of value because it hurts you so much. Like significantly below 1B of value. So not particularly great. And this attack thing is like way worse than your regular fist attack. I take that back. This attack is not actually way worse than your big. It deals significantly more damage. Each hit is 60, so it's actually one of the highest DPSs in the entire game. Again, that's why speedrunners like it. And you get the extra dashes. But you are very, very vulnerable during it. So it's actually a better attack than the fist. This is what I get for not looking at the numbers before I talk. I mean, I personally have tried to make Gilgamesh work so much, and I can't. I get hit so much compared to when I use regular fists. And like when I use Talos' fist, I get hit so little. Anyway, that's Gilgamesh. I think it's one of the more interesting weapons to play with, honestly, because it's so different from the regular fist, but it requires, like, maybe if I was better at this movement thing, because you see how much movement you get, right? You actually get like so much movement from this compared to the fist, because there's that little gap. Like it's good and bad, right? Like you see the little gap between your hits in a way that regular fists don't have. Well, in those gaps, you can also see yourself moving faster, right? Like compare this. You see how I'm moving around to regular fists as I'm moving around. Way slower, right? But it's way easier to deal with because you have that defined period where you can cancel, whereas you can't here. Okay. So that's aspect of Zagreus. I'm sorry, aspect of Gilgamesh. And aspect of Zagreus is the worst. It's just your fist. It's your base weapon, but you get 15% extra dodge. A lot of people like it. It's one of the Zagreus ones that actually people like tell people to use, where I don't hear people tell anyone to use any of the other Zagreus builds. But mathematically, it's not actually one of the better ones. It's like a medium one. I think they just like it's a useful way to stack dodge, right? Like if you happen to get the other dodge stuff. So it's like a build-centric one, or if you really push everything to a certain build, you can get a lot of synergy. And it's also like idiot-proof, because the whole point of dodge is that the game dodges for you, so you just get hit all you want. But 15% dodge is actually not like that valuable. Again, it's not bad. I mean, it is bad in terms of what it's providing you. But because fists are an okay weapon, and this doesn't mess with the fists, it just adds to it. It's overall like still an okay weapon to use. Like I would consider it balanced, especially for a Zagreus one. Okay, so that's the bow and the fists. I think fists are very interesting. I feel like there's a lot of room to improve, right? Like I hate that you have to use mouse and keyboard to get the best out of it, but I think fists are more controller friendly in terms of the movement than like as we'll see with the sword. Because you can actually like you're locked in this enough times that you can actually do something with it. Whereas for the sword, it's a continuous attack pattern, so you actually have to swing in the wrong direction to move in the to move away. Here, you can move wherever, and then you can move, right? And even if you miss a hit, it's just 1 out of 5 hits, and you don't have to miss a hit if you time it right. Anyway, that brings us to our 2 worst weapons. By the way, the fist is a tiny bit better than the bow as a base weapon, in case anyone's wondering. Like 0.3 better. They're in the same tier. It's not that big of a difference. Sword and rail, we'll go with the second to last first. We'll go with sword, which makes rail the worst base weapon. But as we'll see, this is where things get very different. So sword is 0.2 above rail. So shield and spear are around 11. Bow and fist are around 10. Sword and rail are around 8. So that's a pretty big dip. Right? You only dip 1 from spear, shield to bow, fist, but you dip 2 from bow, fist to rail, sword. So these are the base weapons to these suck. That's also why if you're just starting out the game and you have a sword and you're like, oh, why is the game so hard? Well, the sword sucks. Now, these 2 weapons are going to go in very different ways, okay? Because the sword is going to have crappy weapon aspects that are just crappy. Like some of the crappiest in the game. On top of one of the worst weapon bases in the game. So the sword is going to end up being crappy. The rail, on the other hand, has 1, 2, 3, 4... Okay. Has 3 of the top 4 or 5 weapon aspects by the value the aspect adds on top of the base. 3 of the top 5. So the rail actually ends up being decent, despite the fact that the base rail is the worst weapon in the entire game. Anyway, let's do sword first. We talked about the sword in the beginning in terms of this combo and how you can actually move around decently with it. I think this is the key to making sword halfway decent. I don't know. I do not make sword halfway decent. I suck with sword. And I swear to you, this is just a coincidence. Or maybe it's not a coincidence because I like things that are better over things that are worse. But my favorite weapons are this shield and the spear. And my least favorite weapons are the sword and the rail. You can tell, like, I haven't completed my bounties with sword yet, and I'm even farther behind on rail. Like, but it just worked out that way. I mean, I also think they're the worst weapons, so I think you can kind of feel it. Anyway, I think there's something skill-wise to be said here, but You probably need to use keyboard and mouse to fully unlock it, and it's so bad. I did the math, by the way, for sword. Oh, at the end of all this, I'm gonna have some suggestions on how to balance some of these aspects. But for sword, literally to balance sword to the level of bow and fist, not even sword, a shield and spear, just a bow and fist, you would have to almost double the amount of damage the sword attack does. Just putting that out there. Not actually double. Actually double will make it powerful. But you would have to almost double it to make your base sword at the level of your base bow or your base fist. That's how bad the sword is. And especially when you compare it to the fist, right, which is another close range weapon. It should not be that far behind the fist, and it is. Okay, that being said, I shouldn't shit on the attack too much because the special is really the best part about it, and this is obvious. Everyone knows the sword special is better than the sword attack. It has higher DPS. I don't know if you can add these numbers fast enough to tell, but it has significantly higher DPS. It also knocks back more. But again, remember what we said in the beginning. This is like half a knockback compared to the what do you call it? Compared to the shield, or compared to the sword. Like, you see how much the thrust knocks it back? That's like a shield knockback. This is not, but it is a small knockback. And I think it works the same on, yeah, say 65, 68, 50. No, wait, hold on. 35. Sorry, there we go. 35, 68. Yeah, okay. It's like literally like half the knockback. I didn't know that before. But yeah, so it's literally half the knockback. It deals half the knockback into wall damage because that's based on the force that you give. And apparently this gives just less force. But aside from the knockback effect, this is very good. Good DPS, way bigger area, and you do this, right? You charge it up and then you go forward, sorry. So this early part where you do this like weird flippy motion, you can do it in more safe areas and then dash in. In fact, you generally do it fast enough you don't even see yourself do this weird flippy motion. So essentially the whole move is cancelable by a dash in terms of the block frames it takes. Also, you can move wherever you want with it. This is free movement. You can move forward, you can hit it and move back. You don't move that far because it's kind of a quick move, but even without a dash, you can move, right? It's kind of my point. So that's the sword. You're going to be doing a lot of this dash thing. In fact, here, dash, 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 cancel into sword. You can cancel the special into the sword, which is pretty much the only reason to use your sword. The other thing that makes sword like possibly playable is your dash attack. Generally, dash attacks are the same damage as your first weapon. Well, this is actually less. So the spear's dash attack is actually less damage, but it's like a really big area. It's not even that big, but it's like bigger than normal. Your shield dash attack is, I'm using a different weapon aspect. Oh, actually, yeah, I can't use Zagreus. I need to use, yeah, so it's 25. It's the same as your attack. Your bow just makes it charge quicker and deal less damage. Again, I'm using weird weapon aspects. Your fist like provides a little bit of AoE and deals a little bit extra damage. It's kind of like a shield. It works kind of the same way, just with more limited range. And it just smoothly goes into your combo, right? But your sword is the only one that has elevated damage. Everyone else has less damage. Your sword has more damage. Now, you don't get a lot of AoE with it. You get a little range compared to what you normally get, but it's like just straightforward piercing range. But plus 50% damage on what you would normally get, right? Your normal first hit is 20. Even your average hit is 25. This is your final hit. So it's still not a good thing. Like, thrust is still not a good move. It's just relatively better than this attack thing, which is terrible. So you do this, you like try to, you know, there's like some canceling things you can do that I'm not good enough to do, but you got to do stuff for the sword to make it work, is kind of my point. All right. The best aspect of the sword is predictably the one that is least like the sword. Arthur is basically a totally different weapon than the sword, as most of these hidden ones are, and it is way better than all the other sword aspects. It is over 4B, one of the top 6 or top 5 weapon aspects in terms of the value it adds. It's just a very good weapon aspect. It gives you 50 extra life, which is super helpful. It has an aura that reduces 40% damage coming in. Like, plus percent damage is less useful because you get a lot of sources of plus percent damage. You don't get that many sources of damage reduction, so this is like good. The problem is you have to stand in this general area, which means you're going to get hit more, but you're taking 40% less damage, so whatever. The other thing is that this is the slowest weapon in the game outside of Rama. Just super freaking slow. Super freaking slow. But on the good part is that it is not a sword. It hits hugely. See how far this goes? Remember how dinky your sword goes? They don't say this in the description, but swords are dinky and have little range. Arthur has gigantic freaking range. And the third one also moves you forward. So there's a little bit of movement here, but not a lot. The special is a little worse because it takes longer to charge up. It deals proportionally more damage, so the DPS is the same, but you don't want to, like... This is a very long charge up. It's very easy to get hit. So yeah, that's Arthur. You kind of just stay safe. What's good about this is also that it slows projectiles down. So don't be afraid to, if you're playing Arthur, I played a lot of Arthur. Because I think everyone plays a lot of Arthur if you're going to play sword. It's just the best sword by far. Don't be afraid to leave it, especially when there's projectile enemies, because it'll still slow down the projectiles. It's also great against Lurny because it disables traps. So you just like do this in the middle of the magma, and then you can like walk around and whatever. And Lurny also does a lot of projectiles. Anyway, it's a different weapon, right? I don't consider this the same as the sword at all. It has a vastly different range. It deals the most DPS in the entire game. It prevents the most damage incoming in the entire game. You kind of just forget about like avoiding damage when you're doing this and just like kind of tank everything. And the game is set up so that you can just tank everything. And I don't just mean on 0 heat. You can tank everything on pretty damn high heat. Like, you can't do forced overtime 2 EM4 like Hades, right? It just kind of doesn't work. But if you don't go that high, you're going to be fine doing this strategy. And that's also one of the things, right? Like, where you talk about, like, Rama being a high heat one, it's overperforming on the high heat. Guanyu overperforms at high heat. Arthur underperforms at high heat. But it's just so much better than the other sword aspects. It's not like the other sword aspects perform. Next up is Poseidon. So for once, we have a cast-focused aspect that is not dead last in its ranking. Right? Beowulf was below Zagreus on shield. Hera was below Zagreus on bow. Poseidon is not. Poseidon is better than Beowulf, better than Hera in terms of what it adds to the weapon. In terms of actually what it is still a sword. So it is not better than Hera. It is not better than Beowulf. Those are both better. But it's adding more. Like, if you're not going to take our aspect of Arthur and you're going to actually play sword, not big giant sword, aspect of Poseidon is the best you're going to be able to. And it has that additional cast damage, which is so clutch, because all you're looking for when you're a cast build is cast damage and additional cast, right? So this already takes care of half the things for you, and you get to get it out so that you can do it again. And you get to get it out using the best move that you have, which is the special, remember? Also, when you get it out, if you have Artemis, you deal even more damage. So it's just a lot of damage. That being said, it's not even a good one. Like, the amount of value this aspect adds to the sword is the same amount of value as like Guanyu adds to the spear, or like Zagreus adds to the shield and bow. They're in the same tier in terms of what the aspect adds. It's just that the other two sword aspects are so bad that this is your best. And remember, sword is almost the worst weapon you can have. It is only 0.2 above rail. It is a grand total of 2.7 Bs. Like 2.7 value below shield. Below base shield. And this Poseidon thing is not even 2.7 of value. So a Poseidon sword is noticeably worse than just a base shield with no additions to it whatsoever. In fact, swords are so bad that, you know how I was like, oh, Arthur's so good. It's because it is still operating on that sword base, sort of. Arthur and Beowulf are close to tied. And Beowulf is the worst shield aspect. Like, it's not... Like, swords are bad, guys. And that's what I mean when I say, like, Beowulf's actually not bad. It's a shield. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's still a shield. And these things are still swords. If you're wondering how we modeled Poseidon, it actually took a while, but I managed to find from first principles, like, a whole lot of stuff about casts and how things with limits work. And how fast you can recover it, and where you would have to move. And we know the movement penalties from where you have to be. Anyway. Zagreus and Nemesis are about the same. Zagreus is a little better than Nemesis, but at this point you're splitting hairs and it doesn't matter. They're all terrible. They're terrible. They're barely better than the Zagreus Spear in terms of what they add to it, and they're much worse than the actual Zagreus Spear because it's a sword, and that's a spear. This gives plus 15% attack speed, which always feels like it would be good, but it turns out it's not that good. Why? Because it adds the attack speed onto your attack. And remember, your attack is dinky and bad. See you again. Ooh. Okay, someone resubbed. I should be turning that off. I guess this will be in the video. 1 second. I gotta turn this off. My bad. Has that been appearing the entire time, by the way? Oh my god, I'm sorry. I mean, I meant to turn alerts off. I didn't even notice. Like, maybe, I think follow alerts may also have been on. Maybe not. I'm recording this right now while Merps is streaming, by the way. In case you're wondering why people are just subbing at random times. Okay, anyway. The run speed is also, obviously, 15% run speed is not that much. And this coming from someone who loves run speed. I remember back in Diablo. Oh my god, runs. Okay, aspect of Nemesis. Again, plus 30% crit chance. Seems like a lot of crit chance. But only for 3 seconds. And it makes you pretend you're special as part of like some kind of combo. And what you really want to be doing is just like specialing and then specialing and then specialing. This one takes advantage of the cancellation. But it just ultimately doesn't give you enough bang. Why? Because once again, you are buffing your attack, and your attack is terrible. So anything that buffs this attack is just not going to do very well. So what they need to do is really make the sword attack a lot better. It's just not even comparable. By the way, in case you didn't know, one interesting fact about the spear. So you have your first 3 weapons, right? Which all kind of do the same thing. Like you may think, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3... 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But you see how this is now actually faster than that. So the spear combo, for no good reason, I mean no good reason, is about as fast as your sword combo with Zagreus. And Zagreus has a 15% speed increase. So that's another reason why the spear is so high. Like, I don't know why. I don't know why they made the spear faster than everything else. It also deals more damage than your sword combo. And of course it has a ton more range. A little less AoE, but a ton more range. I don't understand. I don't understand how these things happen. So you might think, oh, you know, maybe it's the first weapon. They meant for the sword to just be bad. Like, let Supergiant Games be, stop criticizing them about this. Rail's even worse. Again, I don't know if it's intentional, but here, I don't know. The base Rail is absolutely terrible. It is the only weapon where the main attack cannot pierce, has no AoE, just hits single target. It also deals the smallest amount of DPS, even lower than the sword, lower than the fist, lower than anything that actually has DPS. So it is single target, lowest DPS, and doesn't have the range of, like, let's say a bow. A bow has more DPS, even if you don't trigger the sweet spot. It has more DPS, and it goes farther. It also locks you in the same way this locks you in, right? Fully locked, you can't move. Now, you can do this, and because you're attacking so fast, you're not even losing anything. But you can technically do the same for bow too, I guess. So you're a little safer with this than the bow, but it's not by that much. And you don't get the distance, and more importantly, you don't get the pierce. It's not even about piercing. It's just that because it has pierce, if you have like any enemies around in one area, it'll hit all of them, whereas this will always hit just one target. So you might think, okay, so this is kind of bad, obviously, and you have to reload. Although you can move around while you reload. You can also do this, like reload cancel. So what you're generally going to be doing is something like hit. Oh, I want to reload cancel, and then hit, reload cancel, hit, right? Like that's your kind of pattern. But the problem with that is that this thing is also terrible. While your attack is bad, your special is way worse. So the attack is actually not like that bad. Technically, the fist attacks are even worse because you have to get so close and you're putting yourself really vulnerable. But the rail is a second worst. Oh, sorry, the sword is worse. I keep forgetting. I just don't think of the sword attack as an actual attack. I think of it as like not a move. Like the sword attack is so bad. This is better. This alternate move where you stand still for a while and don't do anything and then unleash a sword swing is better than the sword's attack mathematically. Not by much, but it's better. That's how bad it is. So yeah, so this is still nothing to write home about, but I guess it's better than I was kind of painting a picture of it, and I just wanted to. The bow, by the way, has the best attack, in case people are wondering. This is super clutch. And the actual best attack, once you include all of the weapon aspects, is we'll get to it. It's one of the aspects of the rail, actually, but the rail itself, its attack is not that good. Okay, so let's start with the best weapon aspect for the rail, like we've been doing with everyone else. The best weapon aspect for the rail is not Eris. It is Hestia. Everybody loves Eris. I hear so much about Eris, but I love Hestia, and mathematically, Hestia is significantly better than Eris. I mean significantly. Hestia is the largest improvement on the base weapon of any weapon aspect, beating out Zeus. Now, overall, remember, because Rail sucks, it's not better than Zeus. But here you have our third entry into Tier 2. Remember, Tier 1 is just Zeus' shield. Tier 2 is Hades and Achilles' spear and Hestia Rail. And the next tier is pretty much just Talos by itself. Before you get into that whole glut of stuff. I'll show you guys a picture of it after. But this is the rail. Oh yeah, I do have this in an image form, by the way. You can click the link below to find it. I should have probably said this earlier in the video. I'll also put the images up later when I talk about it more. But yeah. The Hestia Rail turns this into a sniper rifle. You hit really freaking far. Okay. I can't aim that well manually without a mouse. But anyway, this is farther than the rail. See, Rail can't hit, Hestia can hit, so you get that extra range. It also deals 150 base damage. Oh, I have memory equipped, so it's dealing more damage. Let's go with something. Yeah, it's 150 base damage, which is insane. Of course, this is single target, just like all the other Rail stuff, but it's not like you have other options as the Rail. So, really good. Also, you don't lose your regular attack, by the way. You can just treat it as the first hit of a regular attack. It's freaking insane. This one is a value of 7. Remember, Zeus was like 5.5 or something? Hestia is 7. Blows Zeus out of the water in terms of what it adds to the weapon. And this is all it does. It's just 150? Why? Hugely ridiculous number. Okay, next is Eris. Eris is not really that far behind in terms of how much value it adds. It adds about 5.5, about the same as Zeus. Really good, of course. Eris, you do this, you have to stand in the explosion zone, and then you get this buff thing that you see, and for, I think, 3 seconds afterwards, everything you do deals extra damage, including another one of these specials to trigger it again. So, with Eris, you're really doing this combo, which again, like I said, it's a cancellation loop, right? Where you do this, you stand here, you hit, you do this again, you stand here, you hit, you do this again, you hit, you do this again, you hit, and you cancel your entire reload. So there's a nice loop built around it. Even when it was, I did do the math on it, but I'm pretty sure even when it was 8 seconds, it wasn't going to beat Hestia. But it would have been the second best one, you know, after Hestia. And it probably would have been close with Hestia. As it is, it's a good weapon overall. Remember, Rail still sucks. So the fact that it's even a good weapon means that it's doing a lot on top of Rail. And last, not last, but like last non-Zagreus one, but not least, is Lucifer. Lucifer is not that far behind Eris. Like, this is what I mean by Rail and Sword going totally different ways. Sword is terrible and has terrible weapon aspects. Rail is also terrible, even more terrible by a little bit actually, but has amazing weapon aspects. Lucifer is a top 5 weapon aspect. And it's the 3rd best one on Rail. So Rail has 3 of the top 5. Lucifer changes your special to this thing, which repeatedly damages, and also you can trigger the explosion yourself by sort of. You can trigger it better with mouse and keyboard as usual. But the area is smaller than the regular ones, but it's good for like zoning because remember these hits they stagger your opponents, so the slower enemies actually just never make it out of this. And you can like kind of just like keep them here dealing 20 damage each time. It's also useful for triggering stuff. You know, imagine it with some like cold or Dionysus or whatever. But that's not what's great about Lucifer. Lucifer has the best attack in the entire game. Because it does this shit. Look. I'm going to kill it first. But the damage, it stacks. Your first hit deals, first of all, it has 20 instead of 12 hits. And the hits deal the same amount of damage. And the hits hit faster. Not like at the same speed. Like, you're not going to get a full 20 clip done at the same speed as you get a full 12 clip done with a reload. It takes... I think it takes 3 seconds to get a full clip done for the regular rail. It takes 4 seconds for this. But the damage stacks. So this is first deals 10 damage, then 11, then 12, 13, 14, 15, etc. So in one full round, this guy's at like half health. Whereas, look how much the same thing happens if I like empty Eris it. 12 hits, right? Barely moved. We were already almost at half, and this is barely below half, right? That's hugely disproportionate amount of damage the aspect of Lucifer is dealing. And that's really where it shines. Is this flashing for you guys, or just for me? Weird. There we go. I think I fixed it. Okay, so that's Lucifer. I have fun playing with Lucifer. I think it's a very good weapon aspect. And it's really very, very close to where Eris is. Totally playable. Like, I think for Rail, you really can't go wrong. Eris, Hestia, Lucifer, all great choices. Hestia, of course, is, in my opinion, the broken choice. Yeah, that brings us to aspect of Zagreus, my least favorite aspect. Bonus ammo capacity, sure, it lets you attack more, but your attack is still bad. It's not really increasing your attack speed. Your reload can basically be entirely canceled by your special, so you're not really saving that much. Like, reload is not a terrible thing for the Rail, and it just doesn't do all that much. It's the largest gap in the game of the weapon aspects is between Lucifer and Zagreus. When it comes to between the last place and second to last in a particular weapon. This comes in at pretty much where like this bad sword stuff is. Like Nemesis is gonna be here. It's still doing this. I don't know why. Alright, well. Just blinking and the game's like dying on me. Okay. So yeah, this is Zagreus one. I don't know why they didn't just make Zagreus have 100%, like have no reload, because that would not make it good, but it would make it a little more passable. I don't know. Okay, so that's all of them, and now that I've done all that, I can show you the list. See, I do have one of these pictures. This is the relative weapon aspects. This is how much each weapon aspect adds to the weapon. I didn't want to show you before because I didn't want to spoil it, but now we're here. Now we're 2 hours into the video, and I have probably another half hour to go. Ooh, good estimate by me. Okay, as you can see from this chart, Hestia is all the way up there. Zeus and Eris are next. They're just stuff that adds a lot to your weapon. You got a lot of good ones. Rama and Chiron are surprisingly low. Remember, Bow overall is decent. We're going to see the cumulative list afterwards. This is just the relative list. So this isn't really how good each weapon is. It's how good each aspect adds to the weapon. Anyway, you see on the bottom a lot of Zagreus's, your Beowulf, your Hera, and then all the swords are terrible. But yeah, if you just looked at this, you would think Rail is amazing. But the base of the Rail is low. Just interesting thing here. This will be linked in the description. And if it's not linked in the description yet, if you're watching this on day one, it will be linked in it within 24 hours of this video coming up. And if you look at my Twitter or like just Google or like use Reddit, my Reddit post will have this linked as well. Now this is the cumulative one. The cumulative one is really what the weapon is, right? Because what's the point of separating out the aspect unless you're like a game balancer, right? You care about the whole weapon as a whole. So as a whole, this is where things stand. As you can see, again, swords are terrible. Rail is okay, right? The Hestia, Eris, Lucifer, they're actually doing quite well. On the fist side and the bow side, you don't have your superstar weapons. You don't have a Hestia. You don't have a Hades/Achilles. You definitely don't have a Zeus. But Talos and Demeter aren't bad. They'll do their jobs. You know, people who are still pushing for like Chaos Shield, for example, and obviously Rama Bow is great. These are all very usable, right? Like, what basically the model says is, let's pretend Chiron is rated a 12.5, and Zeus is rated a 16.6, as I have the number. That means you're losing 4 boons worth of value if you pick a Chiron over a Zeus. Now, you get what? On average, like 5 boons, maybe 6 boons over the course of a biome. So losing 4 is quite big. And that's kind of what the gap shows, right? That's why there's like 4 spaces of gaps. Yeah. Your playstyle and the amount of heat you take, like I said, really determines a lot of this, though. Like, if you're adding heat, right? Like, it just has a pretty big effect. But I thought this was useful, just in terms of thinking about it, and definitely in terms of gathering all the information it takes to make this model. I learned a lot about the game. So yeah, I'm now going to talk about my ideas, and I do this at the end of every one of these tier list videos, because it's not just about the tier list. I am, I think, a game developer at heart, or at least a game balancer, a game designer / game balancer. I care less about fun and more about like some platonic ideal of correctness in gaming balance, which I understand is not a particularly popular thing to do in the game dev community, but that's what I care about. And I have done some game balance work. I have worked at the dev side for Gods Unchained, the card game, for over a year actually as the lead balance designer. And so I pitch my ideas, right? I think I can think both in terms of a player and in terms of a game dev, of a game designer on the designing side, because I also design a lot of cards. But I can also think, as you can see from my models and stuff, what the correct balance is. What I'm probably the weakest at and don't care as much about is this fun aspect that's actually driving all of game design these days. But that's another story. So here's how I would balance things, right? First thing I would do is I would buff the base sword and the base rail, because they are so far behind. Like, look at this. 8.3, 8.1. I want everything in around a 10. So in order to do that to the base sword, I would literally add 20 base attack to the sword. You can get away with 15. If you add 15 to the base attack, that means your first hit comes out at 35. Maybe you can up your dash attack to like 45 or something, and then you can have like 15 base attack instead of 20. But I'm okay just adding 20 base attack to everything. So your dash hits for 50, your first attack hits for 40, second attack for 45, third attack to 50. I do not think that would make the sword OP. That's how bad the sword is. Like, this is a huge balancing miss if they actually wanted the sword to be balanced. I do suspect, though, that Supergiant games did not actually want the sword to be balanced. So maybe all of this is that there's like, if they hear me, they're like, oh, this guy wants to balance the sword. He's totally whoosh, right? But okay, whatever. I think that the sword has to be balanced. Or if the sword is not balanced this way, because of, I don't know, the early game, you don't want the sword to be too powerful or whatever, then the weapon aspects need to be powerful, like they did with the rail, right? But I'm thinking of it from a very flat way where I want all the base weapons to be the same, and I want all the aspects to be more or less the same, or within a certain range. So I would give 20 base attack to the sword, and I would give the rail 5 base attack and 20 base special damage. This all sounds like a lot, like a big buff, and it is a big buff, and because they need a big buff, I think they're very far behind. Now, this base doesn't apply to the hidden aspects, which I just consider a totally different animal altogether. Like, Arthur's fine. You don't need to touch Arthur. Lucifer's fine. You don't need to touch Lucifer. This is just for the other ones. And on the other side, on the base, I would nerf the spear and the shield, obviously. This is not rocket science. For the spear, I would just make it have the same freaking attack speed as the sword and the shield, as it should. I don't know why it's hitting faster, but if you just did that, the spear will be balanced out. Like, just the faster 3-hit combo is really what's making the spear significantly better than I think it should be. They had to have done that on purpose. You don't miss something like that. And I don't know why they did that, but if that's something that needs to be done, you nerf it some other way, right? But just off my head, that would be how I nerf the spear. And as for the shield, I would take away 5 damage on the shield. There's no reason that the shield is, like, compared to the sword right now, the shield has more range, more protection, the ridiculous bonus knockback damage, because that's just, every shield attack has a bonus knockback in a way the other weapons all don't have. And also deal more damage. Like, it's silly. The shield should have a penalty for what its attack is doing, and it should be made up by the fact that you can knock things against the wall and then deal a ton of damage. So I think the shield damage should be 20 instead of 25. I think that will balance out the shield. I mean, I know it will. I have the model here. These are all things where if you did these, it would make all the numbers line up to 10, right? On the other hand, I would make 4 changes to the Zagreus stuff to kind of make them like more fun to play. And then I would make 4 changes to the other weapon aspects to bring the top line down and the bottom line up. So all total, I would make 12 changes to weapon aspects, and it would bring everything into perfect balance, more or less perfect balance, I think, in my opinion. So the Zagreus aspects for sword, like you may think, oh, if you're giving sword plus 20 base attack, surely the Zagreus aspect with 15% attack would make it even better, and it would be fine, right? No. Zagreus aspect on sword is just really terrible. Look at this. This is relative. Zagreus is still terrible. This is relative. This is compared to other sword. You're just adding value to it, right? You're modifying the value. So for Zagreus sword, I would make it 20%. Small buff, 20% instead of 15%. Just to bring it, it'll still be bad, right? I'm not trying to make Zagreus weapons anything more than half as good as regular weapons. But Zagreus sword is just kind of too bad. Same with spear. Zagreus spear, like we went over before, worst weapon aspect in the game when it comes to how much it modifies the spear. And that, I think, is part of the Supergiants maybe not recognizing that the spear's special is weird. It's not bad statistically, not statistically, it's not bad mathematically, but it's duplicative of kind of what the spear normally does, and it's not doing its work. So I would buff it, and one of the easier ways to buff it, I think, is to give it plus 25% base damage rather than plus 25% regular damage. That effectively increases its total damage output quite significantly. And I think that will put it so that, I think that'll basically make it a weak weapon instead of like a totally trash weapon. For the rail, I don't know what to do with the rail, man, in terms of the Zagreus thing. I guess it's fine. Probably make the ammo unlimited. That would be my suggestion. Why? Why not make it unlimited? When you're not making something OP, and you can... The whole point of it is so that... I feel like it's to get rid of an annoyance, right? Because instead of reloading, and you're annoyed that you have to do it, and you have to like do a combo or whatever, it's just no think easy mode, right? That's like Zagreus fists, for example, which are totally fine. It does the same thing. Like, just no think. We dodge. We want to dodge. We're up close. We're going to get hit. We dodge. We're good. So here, just don't have to reload. We're good. And on the other side, I would nerf Zagreus shield. Zagreus shield currently adds 15 base attack, and make it add 10 base attack instead of 15. I don't see the, I don't know. It's just too good right now compared to the other Zagreus stuff, and this will bring it in line. If they want it, if they think that nerfs it too much, they can also add the attack bonus to dash attack, which it currently doesn't. I'm pretty sure it currently doesn't affect dash attack, which is an odd thing to leave out. But I guess if they added it to dash attack, it would make it even more powerful, and we definitely want to avoid that. So change the bonus to 10, add it to dash attack if you want. So that's fixing kind of the bottom on the Zagreus weapons. It'll make all the Zagreus weapons, like I said, about half as good as the regular weapon. Now, for 4 weapons that I would actually change, 4 aspects I would actually change. Remember, we already brought the spear and the shield down. So everything that's scaling off of them is actually already more okay. So Hades and Achilles may be the best weapons. Number 2 and number 3 in terms of the best weapons right now. But once you bring the spear down, because the spear attack speed is being lowered by effectively 15%, all of a sudden Hades and Achilles are no longer that great. They're just regular good, right? So you solve a lot of problems just by doing things like that. You bring the sword up, all of a sudden Poseidon, which was a bad weapon, even though it was the best of the bad, is just not bad anymore. It's actually an okay weapon, and it's totally fine. So after doing that, I think a lot of things are already fixed. Now, the ones that actually the ones that actually need to get fixed more, I guess. And Eris, by the way, I did the math on it. Eris gets like a little bit more powerful than I kind of want it, but it's fine. Like if they wanted to, they can reduce Eris also by like a little bit in terms of what its effect is. If they think that's getting out of hand with these changes, but otherwise the balance kind of solves everything except for these 4 things. One is Nemesis Sword. Remember, Nemesis Sword is still bad. We were talking about Zagreus Sword still being bad. Nemesis Sword is also still bad. It has the combo thing that's coming. Man, it's getting late. It has the combo thing that requires you to use 2 different moves. It's only 3 seconds. You can't like bank it, and it requires you to use the attack. The attack is better now, but overall, the chance to crit is just not enough to make it like right. That's why it's here. It's oh, sorry. That's why it's here, right? That's why it's terrible. So I would actually increase the crit to 50% instead of 30%. Remember, the sword attack is just so bad. We're making it deal 20 more base damage, but it's still bad because it's still so short. It still forcibly moves you forward, like the sword attack. I think that'll make it okay. Like it'll make it Arthur level, right? Next, I would buff the Hestia Bow. The Hestia Bow's ability, which is at best, it reduces the drop time of your cast crystals to 5 seconds, which is still insanely long. Like Poseidon gets it out immediately, right? Beowulf, the crystals never go into stuff, right? You've changed the way the whole crystal system works. So for Hera, like, why not just scale that ability down, right? Why can you leave it at 5 seconds? Bring it down to like 1 second. Like, I think that'll help it. So those are the ones that need buffs. On the other side, some things are going to need nerfs, namely Zeus and Hestia. Because remember, we raised Hestia by 2 points on its base. We raised Rail by 2 points. So now Hestia is going to be based off the regular Rail, and that's going to be somewhat problematic. It's not going to be that much worse because the whole point of Hestia was that you're trying to use your alternate attack, so increasing the base damage of your regular attack doesn't quite affect the alternate attack, but Hestia was already, as you can see, it's already great. You don't want to make it even better, even if it's just the regular attack that you're trying not to use that you made better. So I think a good way to change it is to keep the regular shot to where it is at 10 instead of raising it +5 the way we're doing for all the other ones, and also reduce sniper shot to like 120. Like I really think Hestia is good, and in addition to all these changes, I would increase the range of Hestia to Rama Bow's attack range, which is the largest range that I've seen in the game, just to make it even more snipery, right? So make it deal less damage, but make it hit even farther. And then for Zeus, they just need to make the attack like lower damage. The whole concept is fine. It's currently getting 30 damage. We're raising the damage of its we're lowering the damage of the shield by 5 attack total. So if you lower the special by, let's say, 10 attack and make it 20, which is the same as your normal attack now, you'd get Zeus's shield down to a medium level. So those are my suggestions. It's just 12 changes, maybe 13 if you want to include Eris. I didn't really math Eris out, I realize now. So maybe 13 changes, and then that would bring all the weapon aspects together. So compared to keepsakes, for example, I think the weapon aspects, especially the weapons themselves, are a little out of whack. They are not all created equal or roughly equal. And I think there's some work that could be done here. With the heat, you can make an argument that you want certain heats to be easier than others, so people have an escalating level of difficulty. Like, especially that last mirror being only worth 2 points. They knew they could not know, right? Like it's actually worth like 6 points. They only made it worth 2 points. You don't make that mistake. That's way too big of for any margin of error, right? Especially when they got the other ones like mostly within a certain range. So yeah, that's this is my my tier list for weapon aspects. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments. Feel free to go to the Reddit thread that's going to be up, where I'm going to write this out, kind of. Am I going to write this out? Yeah, I'll do a summary of it. It's just a lot of information. Anyway, I still have the model here, so I can still test stuff out and modify numbers. And if they ever do a patch, I don't have to redo everything, right? I just change one number in my model, and then everything itself, and it's all good. So yeah, that's it for us and the weapon aspects tier list. 2 hours and 15 minutes, better than I expected, actually. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything I'm missing. I think we're good. If you have any questions about how like weapons work and stuff like that, because I've actually like stood there and like measured everything in terms of like ranges. One of the things also that I didn't mention before is the range of spear on the wiki is wrong. It's off by like 50 units. And I think that's because that's the old range of spear, and at one point they buffed the range and the wiki didn't catch up. But that was throwing me off for a little bit until I like actually like looked at it in the game, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's not right. Yeah. All right. Well, not next time. This should be the end of our Hades tier list. I am not making a tier list for boons unless like this stuff totally blows up, because it just gets harder and harder. Like there's so many boons that I would have to value. Actually, I don't know. There's probably not that many boons. But it takes up a lot of time, and you don't get to select the boons anyway, you know? So who really cares? And at really high heats, you definitely don't get to select the boon, right? Like at really high heats, you're taking approval process, and you kind of just take what you're given. So I think in terms of the balance between usefulness and interestingness, we are at where we're at. Anything more than that would be balancing just for technical reasons. Like if I worked at Supergiant Games, I would do this, but like it's a single player game where at the highest difficulties they literally remove choice, so it's fine if the boons aren't all balanced. And they're not. I know some boons that have such terribly low value, and some boons with like more than double, well, way more than double, more than triple the average value of a boon. Just off the top of my head. But for the most part, they're balanced. Like I'm talking about outliers here, and you probably know the outliers. Like not Athena, but some of the ones that just math-wise, you're like, oh, well, this can't possibly add up correctly. All right, that's it for us then. We are going to, I'm going to upload the high heat runs that I do if I happen to do them on stream and I have a video of it. So I have my 40 heat Rama run. I know people are doing like 60 heat Rama runs, so 40 heat is not terribly impressive, but if you want to hear my running commentary as I do it, it's also my personal best, tying with my Zeus shield, and I'll be trying to beat it. I'm not going to quit this game until I get a 48 heat run at least, and I picked 48 because it's the max heat 64, 75% of that. And if you watch my Hades Pact of Punishment tier list video, you know what I consider balanced is going down 25% or going up 33%, or dividing by 0.75. So I feel like this game was not designed at all to be doing 64 heat, but it was definitely designed to be doing 32 heat because there's literally a statute for it. So as a challenge, hitting that 75% mark, I think is very doable. Even for an old boomer like me with limited amounts of reaction speed and hand-eye coordination. All right. That really is it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you play Hades and you want to share this video, like, thank you so much. Like, anyone who cares about stuff in this depth, I feel like would benefit from like at least hearing about these ideas and like thinking about it in a certain way. I know a lot of people have asked me to just like put my motto out there, but I use I have a whole system, and I do have plans to maybe do this in the future for other games. Other games that may look similar to Hades, other games that may be similar to Hades that may be developed by Blizzard. So I'm gonna keep it a secret for now, but I may eventually release it all to open source. But it will be like way in the future. Until then, I feel like I put not just a lot of work into it, but also that it's clearly like also not perfect. I'm like a little embarrassed to like put it out there because this is, like I said, right, the Hearthstone algorithm is like 1,000 times more complicated than this. So this is imprecise. And I'm sure it will not be that hard for people to be like, oh, you did it this way, when really mathematically it should be that way. And be like, okay, so I'm 0.1 off, 0.2 off. Does it really matter? But anyway, I'm rambling. It's late. I'm out. Thank you guys so much. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and if people manage to blow this video up, I may do the rest of the Hades model. But the highest likelihood is that this is it, and we are done. Hades will still be streamed every Tuesday night until I stop playing the game. Like, personally, until I stop playing the game, then I'll stop streaming Hades. But until then, I will be doing it, and you can come and watch me try to hit 48 heat with all the weapons. Yeah.